Hi, my name is Ben, and today I am reviewing a movie that I've been told is highly anticipated by some. It is the Outrun starring Saoirse Ronan. I'm from Sacramento, so of course Ronan has a connection here just due to the film Ladybird. I have to be fully honest, going into this movie, I can't pretend I was not anticipating watching this movie. It's an addiction movie and a recovery movie. How many times do I need to see this? It just didn't sound interesting. If I am being ungenerous, I would say that the only reason this film is getting any kind of a push or even got the attention of this actress is because it is designed to be a role that could win Ronan an Oscar. That is my ungenerous take on the movie, but you know what? I go into any movie with an open mind, and I want to believe that this story can be elevated. I want to believe that this movie isn't cliched. I want to believe that this movie actually has something interesting to say. To my disappointment, The Outrun is not one of those movies. In fact, it was everything that I feared this movie would be. It is unignorably repetitive. I have seen every beat of this movie in other movies. And you know what? Movies can be cliched. They can be repetitive. They can be speaking on one another and even playing with the ideas of other movies and being in communication with the history of film. That's not what this movie is. This movie has no real original thoughts in it. And that is so mean to say. I totally understand it, but it's how I felt watching this movie. It is 2 hours for some reason. And again, I'm going to be generous on this real quick. I'm going to give what I believe the intent of this film is to be, especially with its runtime. I believe that this movie is supposed to be 2 hours and feel very slow. The pacing is supposed to be just off, and it is supposed to kind of feel like a grind because we are quite literally feeling the character that Saoirse Ronan plays. We are feeling how she is feeling as she's going through the steps of rehab, and one day it's detached from alcohol, 2 days, 5 days, a week, a month. Like, we are supposed to feel how slow and agonizing that is. And I guess in that way you could say this movie works. My biggest issue with this pacing and with basically everything involving the Outrun is just because a character has a very human, relatable story doesn't make that character interesting. And I cannot say for a second that I found this protagonist that this film follows interesting or worth spending 2 hours with. It's just, to be honest, nothing there for me to grapple with, nothing for me to think about. It is just a movie that I felt like was a bummer because, of course, it is. I will say it has a little bit of an uplifting ending that I liked. The last 20 to 30 minutes of this film are certainly the best. Everything else about this movie I didn't like. And it really does just come down to the belief that I have seen this movie before, and I've seen this movie done better times. Let's talk about the star central performance in this movie, which comes from Miss Ronan. She is undeniably a very talented actress, and I would say that she is good in this movie, giving a performance that I think is a bit beneath her. That's also going to sound harsh. I am also just going to say she has a really bad history of taking roles that don't suit her talent and taking material that just isn't at her level. That's the issue that I had with The Outrun. So she is talented enough in this movie. I think she's giving probably a very commendable performance. It's just in service of nothing. And it's a huge issue when I'm watching an actress that I think is talented, that I like, that I know can be great, and I'm just watching them just go through really bad material. So it's kind of this question of, is the movie bad? Is the performance bad? Is it just everything kind of not working together and thus the movie doesn't flow? I think in this case, Ronan is, to me, my struggle with her is they just give her so many bad lines in this movie. I could not believe how much this movie just felt like a Wikipedia entry. And by that, I mean that this character is, I believe she is a marine biologist, or she's someone who is working with animals and studying them for science. And often in this film, it just kind of like resorts to one paragraph readings of Wikipedia pages for the audience. Like it is quite literally probably like the definition that you would find on Wikipedia. And she's just repeating it. Like she's talking about a bird and she's like, oh, this bird does this and they migrate here. And then they only have a 30% chance of surviving, blah, blah, blah. The film like doesn't just do that once. Like it's a pretty constant narration of this movie is her just kind of going through her marine biology. And I'm just like, what's the point of this? Like, is this supposed to show what's keeping her grounded? Like where she's finding her new passion, what she's putting her energy in, which I believe is the point. Watching it, I just was really just left just kind of really, I don't want to say bored, but honestly, had the theater been a cooler temperature that I was watching it at, I would have fallen asleep. And I don't fall asleep at movies ever. I don't think I've ever fallen asleep in a theater ever in my life. This movie could have done it. Like I was so miserable watching this movie. So again, it is just this idea of, yeah, if this is the movie that you're looking for, if you are looking for a movie about a woman trying to overcome her substance abuse, then sure, I can say that this movie probably does the job. I can say that this movie gives a competent performance at its lead. I don't think this movie is memorable. I know some people have raved on it. To be honest, I found the movie quite predictable. I found it quite repetitive. And within 40 minutes of the movie, where I still then had like another hour to go, I was like, oh, okay, I get what this movie is going to be. It's not going to change pace. It's not going to do anything more interesting from here. And it just doesn't deliver in any way. Again, I am going to give some credit because I've definitely bashed this film a bit. I think the last 20 minutes have something interesting to say. I like the dynamics that they took, especially with the mom character in the final 20 minutes. It, again, just gives it a little bit of humanity, shows the day-by-day struggle, and you get to see this life and world evolve for these characters' viewpoints and some of those struggles that come with it. And I think that is actually what this movie could have been. It's just that everything else doesn't really work in service. This is a story that by design is quite isolated, but the main character is unable to hold my interest on screen. And thus I am left isolated with a character that I can't really say was able to capture any emotion for me, just due to the writing, due to a direction that I just found ultimately extremely flat. I didn't think the camera moved in any way. There's some beautiful scenery of this film where I believe this is shot in Ireland. Ireland is beautiful. And I also thought there'd be way more beautiful ways to capture Ireland on this camera. I didn't think this movie looks particularly good. So I wasn't just, this movie is so naturalistic, especially with this character's marine biology interest. And yet the nature of this movie didn't absorb me. It felt actually quite distant. And maybe that's again the point because, you know, this character is distant. She is isolating herself essentially. But again, it just doesn't work to any service. So maybe that is the intent of the director. That is the intent of the screenplay. That is the intent of the main actress in this film. It could be. It didn't make for an interesting film. This is one of those things while watching this movie, I had that thought, and I try never to just think about Oscars while watching this movie. However, I must fully admit it. While watching the Outrun, I just kept thinking, this movie's not interesting. I'm not into this movie. I don't think this movie's going to have an audience. It's not going to have any form of a shelf life. And yet this movie does seem like it's going to be the spoilers for a performance that I actually do find interesting. Essentially, my fear with this movie is in a few months we're looking at it and Saoirse Ronan gets an Oscar nomination, maybe even a win for the Outrun. And then I'm looking and I'm like, oh yeah, Demi Moore was left out for The Substance. Or another actress who gives a great performance is just left out on the outside looking in because we had to give Ronan a nomination for a performance that always seems to get nominated. I felt the exact same way a few years ago with To Leslie. We just have to keep rewarding this type of movie. And to be honest, it's cynical. I get it. I honestly think that might be the intent of the movie. It's not, I know it. I know no artist goes into a film with that intent. Watching it, I really can say that unless you're just an Oscar diehard who really wants to know every detail of the race and really connect to this year's narratives and really want to see Ronan as she's in this film and Blitz and get involved with the narratives of the Oscars coming up in 2025, then sure, go watch this movie. If you don't have that level of investment, I can't say there's much there for you. So I would honestly consider skipping. I'm going low with my review, 1.5 out of 5 stars for the Outrun.